Welcome to the video solutions for the Edexcel Functional Skills English Level 2 Writing Practice Paper 2. In this video we will go through the questions and you can get a better idea of what you want your answers to look like, as well as what to look out for when planning your answers. Before we look at the questions, we'll have a quick look at the marking criteria that you'll be assessed on. So during your writing exam, you'll be assessed on these criteria here. Including punctuation, using correct grammar, spelling words correctly, including specialist words, communicating your information, ideas and opinions clearly, coherently and effectively so that your writing makes sense, writing using an appropriate level of detail and making sure that your writing is an appropriate length, organising writing for different purposes, using formatting and structure. So you want to be thinking about organisational features, conveying clear meaning and establishing cohesion using organisational markers. So that means connecting your ideas together, using different language and register that is suited to audience and purpose. So you need to be considering the audience and purpose of the text and using language that is appropriate for that audience and purpose. And finally, constructing complex sentences consistently and accurately and using paragraphs where they are appropriate. So let's take a look at the first task. We've been given an information box here. This gives us a little bit of context that we can use to answer the question appropriately. So you volunteer at your local community centre. The community centre needs repairs and new equipment. There is also limited access for people with disabilities. You have been asked to contact a local business group to ask for financial help and other support. So you need to sort of step into this role as a volunteer at your local community centre, and you need to contact a local business to ask for financial help and other support in order to deal with these problems. So we need repairs, we need new equipment, and we need to consider accessibility issues. So we need to fix those. Your task is to write an email to the local business group to persuade them to help. In your email, you should describe the problems, explain how the business group can help, and say how businesses will benefit. So we've been given the text type here. We need to write an email. And we've been given the audience, the local business group. And we've got a little bit about the purpose here. We want to persuade them in order to help save the community centre. So we need to tick all of these boxes. We need to describe the problems. So for example, we need to say what needs repairing. It could be a roof that needs repairing, it could be windows, we need new equipment. We could talk about the types of equipment that would be useful. For example, if the community centre wanted to set up a yoga group, they might need yoga mats. We also need to explain how the business group can help. So we want them to give us some financial help and see if there's any other support that we could provide. So for example, we could ask them for some money, some funding, and we could also ask them if they could contact other businesses, see if they could find some further support. And then we need to say how the businesses will benefit. So have a think about how the businesses will benefit from having a local community centre. And we need to write 250 to 300 words. So without further ado, let's take a look at the answer to this question. So here we've got the email address that the email has been written from and the email that it's been written to, so the person that we're writing to. And then we have a subject line, which just gives a brief overview of what the email will be about. So, dear Sir/Madam, I am a volunteer at the community centre in town and I am writing to request your financial aid or any other help you can offer. We are in desperate need of a large amount of repairs. The roof leaks, windows have been broken due to careless vandals, equipment is outdated and there is no accessibility to the building for wheelchairs and prams. Our community centre is a vital hub for vulnerable communities in our town, as well as a social meeting point, information centre, and place for children to play. So these repairs and equipment updates are desperately needed. The accessibility issue is pressing and affects around 30 people a week who are trying to utilise the important resources of the community centre. How can you help? We believe you can make a massive difference to us, not only through financial aid, but by putting the centre in contact with building contractors, fundraisers, or other businesses in your area who would be willing to lend a hand. A financial donation of whatever you can spare would be appreciated. We are a non-profit organisation, so everything you donate will be put directly into repairs and improvements. Your business will definitely benefit, not only from the good publicity that comes with saving a community centre, but also from the higher morale of employees who are part of the town and will be better served by a thriving centre. Yours faithfully, John Smith. Okay, so let's consider why this is a high mark answer. So we'll start with one of the marking criteria, which is punctuation. So in your answers, you should always correctly use capital letters and full stops in every sentence, and you should use commas effectively as well. And this answer definitely does this. We have a capital letter and we have a full stop at the end of each sentence. Remember that you can also use an exclamation mark or a question mark to end your sentences if you want to emphasize your emotions or if you want to ask a question. We've also got lots of commas to break up ideas. So we've got commas used to create a list here. So the roof leaks, comma, and then the next thing, windows have been broken, and then another comma, equipment is outdated, and then we don't need a comma at the end, we've got an and instead, and there is no accessibility. We've also got commas to break up different ideas. So we have, we believe you can make a massive difference to us, comma, not only through financial aid, but by putting the centre in contact with building contractors. So can you see how that comma separates these two ideas? That you can make a massive difference and they can do it by providing financial aid and putting the centre in contact with building contractors. We also have other punctuation in this answer. So we have this slash at the top. Because we don't know who we're writing for, you would use dear sir / madam. We also have a semicolon used at the start of the list here. If you don't know how to use semicolons, that is quite a sophisticated piece of punctuation, so don't worry about it. But if you do know how to use them, it would be really good to include them so that you can show the examiner that you know how to use a really strong range of punctuation. As we mentioned earlier, we have an exclamation mark to add emphasis and emotion to the answer, and we have a question mark at the end of a question here. So lots of different punctuation that has been used correctly and effectively throughout the answer. Next, let's consider spelling and grammar. So for grammar to be correct, you essentially want to make sure that your sentences are accurate and that they all make sense on their own. Often the best way to do this is to try and imagine reading your answer out loud, or when you're practicing for your exam, get someone to read over your answers and see if it makes sense to them. The spelling in this answer is all correct as well, and we've got the spelling of some quite sophisticated words as well. For example, request and desperate. We've got there, and then we have vulnerable as well. Very tricky words to spell. And that's going to show the examiner that you've got really good control of spelling. So make sure that you practice your spelling well in advance of your exam so that you know how to spell a range of simple and complex words. And if you're not sure how to spell a word, then don't include it in your answer because incorrect spelling can lose you marks. So if we have another quick look at the mark scheme, we can see that what we've just covered, spelling, punctuation and grammar, work together to cover 42% of your marks overall. So it's quite a hefty proportion of the paper. and you need to make sure that you're accurately spelling using accurate punctuation and making sure that your grammar's accurate as well in order to achieve high marks for that. The rest of the marks will come from what's called your composition. So that's how the answer is written and organised. So one of the criteria for the composition is the clarity of the answer. So to achieve clarity, you should have good punctuation, spelling and grammar. That'll help to make your meaning clear. And so will reading your answer through in your head or getting someone else to read practice answers. Just make sure that everything is 100% making sense and nothing is particularly ambiguous or confusing in your answers. In your exam, your answers will need to have an appropriate length and be appropriately detailed as well. So usually questions will give you a word count, and we've been given one here, 250 to 300 words. So you need to make sure that you are staying within that word count, hitting that. And practicing questions will give you a generally good idea of what 250 to 300 words looks like on the page. If you're struggling to meet that word count, then you could always make a spider diagram or plan your answer more carefully to come up with more details that you could add. Let's have a look at the details that have been used in this answer, because it's important for your details to be appropriate and be focused on the question. So the question says that we should describe the problems to start with, and problems have definitely been described here. We're in desperate need of a large amount of repairs, and then they've included details such as the roof leaks, windows have been broken, equipment is outdated, and there's no accessibility. So they've explained the issues in some detail there. Then they have explained how the business group can help. So they've asked this question, how can you help? And then they have given some added details. So they've said not just financial aid, but also putting the centre in contact with building contractors, fundraisers or other businesses. And then going into detail explaining a financial donation would be appreciated, and a little bit of detail about them being a non-profit organisation at the end there. So all relevant details that work together to answer the question and address this bullet point here. And then finally we've got say how businesses will benefit. Well, the detail that has been used here, they've said the business will benefit from publicity and also higher morale of employees who might be using the community centre. So the details are all relevant to the question, and the answer does give quite a good level of detail to fully address those points. Formatting and organisation are also important points to consider when you're writing your answers. So you should be using an appropriate range of organisational features in order to match the text type that's been specified in the question. So we've been told to write an email, so we'll have to use organisational features that are appropriate for an email. So these include, at the top here, a from line with an email and a to line with the email that we're writing to as well. And then we have a subject line. So your subject line should just be a few words to summarise what the email's about. And in this case, they've used community centre, which is very appropriate. We've then got another organisational feature here, a greeting, polite greeting at the top. And then we have a sign off with the name of the sender. So those are all of the organisational features that you'll need to be using for the email text type. You also need to write paragraphs in each of your answers. Dividing your answers into paragraphs will mean that your answers are clearer. If you divide up information, it will be easier for the reader to read. So each paragraph works really well to structure the answer. So in the first paragraph, we're introducing the aim of the writing, and we're addressing some of the problems with the community centre here. In the second paragraph, we've got the student here has addressed and explained some of the importance of solving the problems. So it's important to solve the problems. Updates are desperately needed. There are accessibility issues that are affecting people. The third paragraph, they've explained how businesses can help. So the paragraph begins with how can you help, and then they go into detail about that. And then the fourth paragraph is explaining the benefit to businesses, so addressing that last bullet point in the question there. So overall, the paragraphs are really well structured to fully answer the question, and we've got all the appropriate organisational features that we'll need for an email. As well as being well organised, your answers will have to be cohesive. So that essentially means that all of your sentences and paragraphs flow on from each other. All your ideas are linked together in a logical order that makes sense. So, for example, in this paragraph here, we've got all of the sentences in the paragraph being about the same topic. So asking to start with, how can you help? And then answering this question. We believe you can make a massive difference to us, not only through financial aid, but by putting the centre in contact with building contractors, fundraisers, or other businesses in your area. And then the next sentence follows on from that really well, saying a financial donation of whatever you can spare would be appreciated. So referring back to that previous sentence where they talked about financial aid and going into a bit more detail about that. We're a non-profit organisation, so everything you donate will be put directly into repairs and improvements. So that the entire paragraph is about how the businesses can help and what the money will be spent on. We've also got lots of connective words and commas in the answer to link ideas together. So for example, we've got the use of and in the first paragraph a couple of times here to add additional information and ideas. And then further on, we have the use of commas and semicolons to connect some ideas together. So everything really flows effectively, and we've got a logical ordering of paragraphs as well. So the first one introducing the issues, the second one is highlighting the importance, the third saying how to help, and the fourth giving benefits. So this is a really persuasive, cohesive way to show the issues, their importance, and to persuade the businesses to help. In addition to being well organised and cohesive, your answers should use appropriate language and register so that the writing has the right kind of tone and style to match up with the reader that it's aimed at and to fulfil the intended purpose. So if we have a look at the question, we can use the context here to give us some ideas of what we need to be writing, what kind of language we need to use. So because we're contacting a local business, that is a professional audience, so we're going to need to use formal language throughout. Remember that you use formal language for professional groups and informal language for people that you know well, like friends and family. We need to persuade this group to help, so we're going to try and use persuasive language techniques as well. So if we have a look at the answer, we can see that generally the language used here is quite formal. So in the second paragraph, we've got vital hub for vulnerable communities in town, as well as a social meeting point. So this is very much formal language. It's quite sophisticated. There's no use of slang words or any contractions like can't or won't throughout the answer. So it's all fittingly very formal. The language also fits the topic of the question, so the answer is focused on the improvement of the community centre, and we've got the answer being tailored to the audience as well. So because we're writing for a business group that we don't really know anybody from that business group, we've used the Dear Sir, Madam, and we've also got yours faithfully. So yours sincerely is used for people that we know the name of, and yours faithfully is used when we don't know the name of who we are addressing. So overall, the answer is really effective in matching the language to the audience and purpose. We're also trying to persuade them, so we're focusing on you as a business owner, your financial aid. So we're using that direct address there to really draw the reader in. And then we've got adjectives like desperate and outdated to show the real need for change there. And then we've got the question here is really impactful as well, suggesting that the reader should help and telling them how they can help as well. Finally, you need to be able to show the examiner that you can connect together several ideas within your sentences. So this means that you will use longer sentences to communicate various ideas, and it can be helpful to use commas and connective words within these sentences to add on additional information and ideas, or to create a contrast, or to provide an explanation. So, for example, we have the accessibility issue is pressing and affects around 30 people a week who are trying to utilise the important resources of the community centre. So we've got several ideas here. They've given the opinion that the accessibility issue is pressing, so it's important. And then we've got the connective and to add some additional information here, saying that it also affects around 30 people a week. So here we are justifying this opinion that the issue is pressing using the fact about 30 people a week who are trying to use the resources. So 30 people are affected, and then we go on to say that these people are trying to use the important resources of the community centre. So we've got that additional idea there that the resources in the community centre are really important for the community. So try to connect together some different ideas within your sentences and use a wide range of different sentence types, including short sentences and longer ones that link ideas together. So overall, this is a really fantastic answer. It effectively answers the question by addressing each of these bullet points and considering the context that we've been given, that we are a volunteer at our local community centre, and explaining what the community centre needs, what changes we need to make. The answer makes sense and all of it flows effectively. So we've got sentences that are really well linked together and the paragraphs flow in a logical order, and that's really going to help the reader understand what we're talking about. Correct formatting has been used. So we've got the correct format for an email used in the to, from and subject line, and also in the greeting and the sign off at the end there. We've also got accurate spelling and a correct use of a range of punctuation. The writing is very much appropriate for the audience and purpose that have been specified in the question. So we're talking to a local business group and we're trying to persuade them, and the answer definitely fits that requirement there. It's very persuasive, saying that employees will be better served by a thriving centre. Your business will definitely benefit, that kind of thing. Try and persuade the business. So now let's take a look at the second question. Task 2. So we've got this information here. We've been given a kind of leaflet about Zaristar, which is a new online clothes shop for men and women. Our aim is simple: to be the best online fashion shop. We have an amazing range of stylish fashion items at very low prices. Clothes, shoes, hats, sunglasses and watches, everything you could possibly want. Why not visit our website and see our full range? You'll be amazed at the quality and the prices. So our task is that we've bought some items from Zaristar and we were very disappointed with them. You need to write a complaint about what happened on the shop web form. In your complaint, you should describe why you're unhappy with your purchases and explain what you would like to happen next. You should aim to write about 200 to 250 words. So in this question, we need to imagine ourselves in this scenario where we've bought some items and we are very disappointed. So something has gone terribly wrong. We need to say why we're unhappy. So maybe the items didn't arrive, maybe they were the wrong size, or maybe they were faulty in some other way. Perhaps they were ripped or broken in some way. And we also need to explain what we want to happen next. So do we want a refund? Do we want the items to be replaced? And we can use this little leaflet that we've been given here as an example of what to include. So they've said that they offer clothes, shoes, hats, sunglasses and watches. So we could talk about those kinds of products. They're saying that they've got stylish fashion items. We could criticise them and say, well, they've said that they were stylish, but they're really not. They say that they've got very low prices. Maybe we could criticise them based on their prices, say that really they're not worth the value that they've been priced at. And we could mention something from their website at the bottom there. So we need to write 200 to 250 words based on this task. So let's take a look at an example answer. To whom it may concern. I recently purchased a coat, a watch, shoes and a pair of sunglasses from your website, and I was not, in fact, amazed at the quality. Something was wrong with every single item, which I found to be, while somewhat impressive, absolutely ridiculous. The coat, which I ordered in size 8, arrived not only in the wrong size, 16, but seemed to have been exposed to smoke. It smelt absolutely awful when I tried it on, as well as it being stained. The watch was partially smashed on one side due to improper packing. How am I supposed to tell the time when I can't see the second hand of the clock? Additionally, the shoes were mismatched, and to add insult to injury, the sunglasses never even arrived. I am beyond disappointed. Your website advert says that you are the best online fashion shop, yet this experience has been anything but. I expect a full refund on all of my items, as well as a complimentary pair of sunglasses to replace the ones that never arrived. Furthermore, I will never be ordering from your shop again, and I will be letting my friends know about this so they don't make the same mistake. Yours faithfully, Laura Smithy. So now let's consider why this is a good answer. So to start with, on the marking criteria, we're going to consider spelling, punctuation and grammar. So let's start by looking at punctuation. So each sentence begins with a capital letter and ends with a full stop. You need to make sure that every single sentence that you write starts with a capital letter and ends with a full stop. And any time that you use the word I, it should be capitalised. You should also capitalise any proper nouns, for example names. So Laura Smithy has been capitalised there. We've also got the use of commas throughout the answer to add extra details and extra ideas and information. So at the top here, we've got commas used to create a list. So a coat, comma, a watch, comma, shoes, and a pair of sunglasses. We've also got commas to add additional information and to add emphasis. So we've got I was not, comma, in fact, comma, amazed at the quality. So we've used commas there to emphasise in fact, to try and make the tone a little bit more angry about the issue. And then we've added some more detail here, some commas to say that every single item had something wrong with it, which is somewhat impressive, but it is also absolutely ridiculous. So we're connecting these ideas together using commas. What other punctuation can we see being used here? Well, we've got these parentheses used here, so these brackets, and this is to add additional information. So they're in the wrong size and they've just used parentheses to add the additional information that they are in size 16 when they should be an 8. We've also got a rhetorical question here. How am I supposed to tell the time when I can't see the second hand of the clock? So we've got that question mark appropriately used at the end of a question. And in general, punctuation has been used throughout the answer. It's all been used correctly and effectively to achieve certain effects on the reader, to add additional information and to ask the reader questions. We also need to consider grammar. So when you're writing your answers in your exam, all of your sentences will need to be completely accurate and they need to make sense on their own. The best way to do this is often to either imagine someone reading your text out loud, or you could get somebody to read it and see if they understand what you're writing about. See if they understand every single sentence. When it comes to spelling, this answer uses correct spelling throughout. And we've got some very difficult words that have been spelled correctly. So for example, purchased, we've got sunglasses, quality, somewhat, impressive, and absolutely ridiculous. So we've got some longer, trickier words to spell. And if you use longer words in your answers, then you will get some extra points for spelling using specialist words. But make sure that all of your simple words are spelled correctly. Practicing your spelling is really, really important before your exam because it's quite a significant chunk of your marks goes into spelling. So if we have a look at the mark scheme, we can see that 42% of your marks has been covered by spelling, punctuation and grammar. So making sure that your answer is using all of these correctly is very important. Now we'll consider the written content and think about the composition of the answer. So you need to make sure that your answers are absolutely crystal clear and everything makes sense to the reader. Again, it's a really good idea to ask a friend to read through some practice answers and see if they can pick out any sentences that aren't making sense to them. Good spelling, punctuation and grammar will definitely help you to make your meaning clear, so make sure you practice those, but also make sure that anybody would be able to understand your writing if they picked it up and had a read. You will also need to consider how detailed and how long your answer is. So the question will sometimes specify how many words you should write. Here we've got 200 to 250. And we also want to consider the kinds of details we want to include. So the details we've got here are why you are unhappy with your purchases and what you would like to happen next. So they've definitely described why they're unhappy with their purchases. They've said that they've given a few details about each of the items and said what is wrong with them in this paragraph here. And then they've explained what they want to happen next in this final paragraph here. So they've used appropriate details and they've gone into some detail about what is wrong and what they would like in order to fully answer the question. We also need to consider how the answer is organised and formatted. So in this case, we are writing on a complaint form. So it needs to be quite similar to a letter or email. And we've got a polite address at the top there to reflect that. We've also got a sign off at the bottom here using yours faithfully because we don't know the name of the person we're writing to, and then including the name of the sender. Furthermore, we have some paragraphs. So you need to use paragraphs in every single answer that you write to ensure that every answer has a clear structure. Each paragraph should introduce a new idea or topic, and each paragraph should play a slightly different role within the text. So the first paragraph, the role that one's playing is it's introducing what the complaint is about. The second one is explaining in detail what was wrong with the items that they bought. And then the final one is showing how they feel about the situation and what they want to happen in the future. So the paragraphs all flow in a logical order. And this is going to help our answer to be cohesive as well, which is another one of the criteria that you'll be marked on. So cohesive essentially means that your sentences and paragraphs are linked together, your ideas are all joined up so that they flow within the answer, and you aren't including anything irrelevant that doesn't have any importance with regards to the question. So in this answer, we've got sentences that flow on from each other effectively and are linked together. So for example, in the second paragraph, we've got the first sentence about the coat, which is in the wrong size and was exposed to smoke. And then the second sentence gives some more detail about this, saying it smelt absolutely awful. So still talking about the coat and linking to the first sentence. And then they've moved on to the watch, but they're still talking about pieces of clothing and what is wrong with them. So that definitely fits in the same paragraph and runs on from the previous sentences there. So the watch was smashed due to improper packing. And then they followed on from this sentence by asking a question based on the watch. They can't read the time using it. And then they've used this fantastic connective word, additionally. Try to use connective words like additionally, but, and to sort of link your answers together and make them cohesive. So additionally, the shoes were mismatched, and to add insult to injury, the sunglasses never even arrived. So all of these sentences link together because they're all talking about what was wrong with the items, and it all flows in a really logical order. As well as making sure that your answers are well organised and structured, you will need to use appropriate language and register throughout your answer. So this means that you need to consider the audience and you need to consider the purpose of writing and write appropriately based on that information. So if we have a look in the question, we know that the audience is people that work for Zaristar. So we're writing a letter of complaint to them. So if we're complaining, then we're going to want to explain our issues and use quite a negative, upset tone. But we also want to be quite persuasive because we are trying to explain what we would like to happen next. And we might want to be refunded or persuade them that they should do something positive for us. So this answer is really effective in addressing that audience and purpose in the language. We've got quite negative language used throughout, saying something is wrong with every single item, saying that it smelled absolutely awful, that use of alliteration there to try and persuade the reader that really these items are very bad and they should be compensated for this. We've also got relatively formal language. So because we're speaking to a professional organisation, we've got a formal address used at the top to whom it may concern. And then throughout the answer, we've got quite formal language. So for example, we've got the use of furthermore here. You definitely wouldn't be using that kind of sophisticated language for family and friends. We've got complex sentences used throughout with no slang words to keep it nice and formal. And we're appropriately writing to the audience. It's obvious that we're writing to the business because they are saying your website. So overall, the answer is really well matched to the audience and purpose in terms of language. Finally, you should always make sure that you're including complex sentences in your answer. So a complex sentence contains a clause that is dependent in the sentence. So different parts of the sentence need each other to be present in order to work. So that might sound a bit complicated, so let's break it down with an example. So an example of a complex sentence is something was wrong with every single item, which I found to be, while somewhat impressive, absolutely ridiculous. So in this sentence, we have the words while somewhat impressive in the middle there. And no matter how we rearrange this sentence, that clause on its own needs the rest of the sentence in order to make sense. So you couldn't just have while somewhat impressive as a separate sentence because that wouldn't make sense. So altogether, this is a complex sentence because we have multiple clauses that need each other to be present in the sentence in order to make sense and work. So overall, this is a really fantastic answer. We've seen that spelling, punctuation and grammar within the answer are all accurate and appropriate. We've also seen that the answer effectively addresses each point in the question and takes into account the context that we've been given about the fashion shop. We've got a relevant amount of detail that's included about what's wrong with the items and what the person wants to happen. And we've got correct formatting throughout the answer. We've used paragraphs effectively, and each paragraph links together really well. And finally, the writing is appropriate for the audience and purpose because we've used appropriate language and made sure that we're using formal writing because we're addressing a business. So have a go at writing your own answer to this question, making sure that you are taking into account all of the marking criteria that we've seen. So after you've finished your answer, you can go back to the criteria and have a look and see if you have ticked these boxes, see how well you have done overall, and maybe get someone else to read through and see if everything makes sense in your answer, and your answer is really clear and effective.